When people ask me for the name of my condition, I usually say schizophrenia. Most people are satisfied by this answer and move on, but it's not because they really understand what it means. They just recognize the word and that's enough for them. If you're watching this, I assume that's not enough for you. Schizophrenia comes from the Greek root word schizon and phren, which means split and mind, respectively. It's not a very good name. It's antiquated. The idea was that a person with schizophrenia's internal experiences didn't match with the world around them. It was split. We now understand this as psychosis, a blanket term for a wide variety of symptoms which together distort a patient's perception of reality. The most common forms of psychosis are hallucinations and delusions. But it's a lie. I don't have schizophrenia. I've never been diagnosed, and I don't display the most important symptoms. Schizophrenia, like most illnesses, is a spectrum, and everyone experiences it differently and at different severities. There are a lot of related conditions which we call schizophrenia spectrum disorders. On the severe end of the spectrum, we have schizophrenia and its variations like schizoaffective disorder, schizophreniform disorder, and delusional disorder. On the mild end, we have the cluster A personality disorders: schizoid personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder, which is the one I have. You can call it STPD for short. One of the reasons I say schizophrenia instead of schizotypal personality disorder is that not many people have ever heard of STPD. You might think this is because STPD is rare, but I'm not sure about that. I think that it's underdiagnosed because of how it presents itself. Most people with the condition can still function. The only outwardly noticeable symptoms are eccentricity and lack of interest in social activities, which are easy for others to dismiss, and they don't develop close enough relationships for others to notice that there's anything wrong. Schizotypal people are generally paranoid and antisocial, and they don't realize their perceptual distortions are unusual, so they're not liable to seek a diagnosis. Most of them will never be exposed to information about STPD, and what information there is may not be helpful. Some of it is even harmful. That's the other reason I say I have schizophrenia. On Wikipedia, there's a category of articles titled People with Schizotypal Personality Disorder. It has 21 entries, but not a single person on the list is notable for any reason other than violence. There are mass shooters, serial killers, political assassins, and terrorists, but no leaders, artists, entrepreneurs, or scientists. But we already know most schizotypal people don't get diagnosed, and a consequence of that is the only people of any significance who openly have the condition are those who undergo forcible psychological examinations and whose diagnosis is made public, or in other words, criminals. That kind of reputation, alongside asociality and eccentric behavior, leads a lot of people to believe that psychotic people are liable to commit acts of violence. It's all we're really known for. One of the defining symptoms of schizotypal personality disorder are what we call strange perceptual experiences, which are difficult to explain to those who don't have them. They're kind of like Walmart brand hallucinations. Sometimes they're just super watered down hallucinations, like instead of hearing full-blown voices, I sometimes hear someone whisper my name or see flashes at the corner of my vision. I have heard voices before, but they didn't say anything intelligible. A schizophrenic person will usually see and hear specific things and struggles to differentiate hallucinations from reality, which doesn't happen to me. More often than that, though, I have experiences which aren't actually sensory, but do affect my perception of reality, which I think is a concept that's very hard for other people to grasp. The most common one for me is a sort of dreamlike dissociation. My head gets very foggy, and everything looks like a low-resolution video playing in slow motion. When this happens, I get confused, and I find it difficult to understand what's happening around me. There are two other examples which are particularly notable to me. The first happened while I was working at a summer camp. I was waiting for my campers outside of our cabin, and I looked up at the sky and experienced an intense panic attack. I forgot that the blue dome was just light refracting from the atmosphere and perceived it as a physical object, which would of course mean I was trapped in a gigantic room. I was receiving the same visual stimulus as everyone else, but I perceived it differently. The other happened several times while I was buying pints of ice cream from my school's bookstore. We had one of those big freezer tubs with lots of different crap stacked in it, and I saw the pint I wanted, grabbed it, and pulled out an entirely different flavor of ice cream. I thought at first I was just mistaken about which one I had aimed for, but it happened multiple times, even when I was absolutely certain I had gotten the wrong one. I have no explanation for this, other than that the ice cream actually changed flavors while it was in my hand. I understand that's impossible, but it's the only answer compatible with my perception. I haven't had any serious problems with this symptom yet, but it could worsen, so every time I experience something strange, I have to account for the possibility that it simply isn't real. Another common experience among those with STPD is magical thinking, like belief in horoscopes or UFOs. This one I don't have very strongly, but it does affect me. See, everybody has delusional thoughts. I have superpowers, God is talking to me, the government is stalking me, and so on. A typical person's brain treats them like water. The thoughts appear unintentionally and pass through harmlessly. A schizophrenic person's brain treats them like glue. The thoughts get stuck and ingrain themselves as facts simply because they were thought. My brain is more like marmalade. The ideas do pass through, but there's much more resistance, and I might even change my behavior in accordance with them. Sometimes I'm afraid that there are cameras in my room, or that a demon will appear outside my window, and while I understand that these things can't be true, sometimes I still expect them to be. Magical thinking can also account for painful experiences. For a long time, I struggled with the thought that my skin was corrosive because I didn't understand why people wouldn't touch me. It's harder for me to dispel thoughts which are founded in social paranoia. I often believe that everyone around me is thinking about me or looking at me. I worry a lot that people talk about me, although in truth they don't really think about me at all. I really hate to be in any position where people can watch me, especially if they can see what I'm doing on my phone or computer. Professors have gotten angry at me because I only like to sit in the back of the classroom before. It's hard for me to function whenever another person is in the room with me because I'm hyper aware of what I'm doing and I assume the other person is judging every behavior of mine. The most productive time of my life by far was my sophomore year of college, when I got a single dorm and didn't have to attend in-person classes because of COVID. I was a ghost. Nobody ever paid any attention to where I was or what I was doing. I doubt I will ever live in conditions that comfortable again. My school doesn't see STPD as a legitimate health condition and denied my request for a single, and the next semester my grades dropped drastically. Ironically, when I'm having a crisis and I really want people to notice I feel shitty, nobody picks up on it. I feel extremely visible except when I actually want to be. Part of having delusions is that you're not aware they're delusions, which is a source of constant concern for me. I'm more likely to believe in urban legends or conspiracy theories than most people, and I hold some fringe political views. I sometimes wonder if they are what I legitimately believe, or if I've been conditioned to believe them through disorganized thought. The other hallmark symptom of STPD is eccentricity, which of course comes in many forms. I think I rein this in somewhat just because I fear the judgment of others so much. I think that my eccentricity is no less severe than normal, but much more subtle. For example, two of the most common signs of a schizotypal personality are odd dress and disorganized speech. To avoid calling attention to myself, I try to dress and speak as plainly as possible, but I also have a habit of wearing the same clothes for very long periods of time. I once went 2 months wearing the same pair of jeans. I don't talk much in general, and when I do, I tend to speak only when spoken to and answer in short, slurred words and sentences that trail off. This is called alogia. Or speak in a manner which is far too elaborate and stilted with way too much qualification, too many verbs and adverbs, too many examples, and long, complicated metaphors that nobody else can understand. I'm trying to avoid that in this essay, but I feel I'm failing. I also rarely show any emotion when I speak unless I put in a lot of effort. I count syllables obsessively. I don't have OCD because it's not really compulsive, but when I hear someone speak, I usually count the number of syllables in their sentence over and over again until the total number I've counted is a multiple of 8. I've noticed that people tend to talk in 8s naturally. I like to go for long walks in the rain. I chew on things a lot, and my favorite thing to chew is thumbtacks, which freaks people out. All of my favorite artwork is meaningless, avant-garde nonsense. I talk to myself endlessly. I eat in a very messy fashion because I usually just stab my food with a fork and take bites off of it one at a time. I'm afraid of mirrors because I'm scared my reflection might be a sentient entity, and of large numbers because thinking about how many individual things compose a great collective thing gives me a lot of anxiety. A lot of people assume I have autism, but if I do, nobody has ever bothered to tell me. I'm aware the things I do are strange, and I'm able to stop myself from doing most of them, but I find it taxing and stressful to constantly change my behavior for other people, so I can only maintain that facade for a couple days. Everything I've described so far is a positive symptom, which doesn't mean that they're good. It means that they are features that psychotic people have, but typical people lack. A lot of people assume that they cause me distress, or more distress than other symptoms, but they actually don't bother me much at all. I think it's because most people don't really understand what they're like, so they find them scary. What actually does cause me pain are negative symptoms, which are when I lack the ability to do something that typical people can. There are several of these, but the two I'm going to focus on are asociality and avolition. Asociality is the lack of interest in social activities. It's motivated either by a genuine disinterest in interacting with others or fear. I have both. It's my inference that other people feel joy in the sheer state of being around each other, but I don't really feel that. I find it stressful. I don't have a great memory for other people. Most people look pretty much the same to me. I strongly prefer solitary activities, and I could spend the rest of my life without any social interaction whatsoever. I have a detailed inner world that interests me. If I weren't interested in a romantic relationship, I would probably never socialize at all. One big problem is that my asociality is self-perpetuating. I get bullied a lot. In my experience, insults usually fall into one of two categories. One is that I'm immature. I hear the words man-child and privilege frequently. The other thing people say about me is that I'm dangerous. Lots of people have told me I'm intimidating. Some say I'm manipulative, which I don't understand because I almost always tell the truth. My perspective is that if I tell someone honestly that they hurt me and that makes them feel guilty, maybe it's because they did something wrong. In high school, there were rumors that I was a school shooter and a sexual predator. I understand why people thought I was violent. I was a loner, often angry, rebellious, sort of anarchistic, bullied, fascinated by horror and violence. I don't understand why people thought I was a sex offender at all. My school expelled me for the rumors, and I ended up moving away my senior year to escape stigma. I think there's some quality I have that repels people away from me because nobody else ever approaches me for anything social. I feel much closer to other animals than I do to humans. It's also easier for me to connect with people over a computer screen, and I spend massive amounts of time on my phone and laptop. Still, because I fear judgment, I usually try to appear less misanthropic than I really am. I try to avoid eating alone because I know that if I do, others will draw conclusions about me. Avolition is almost impossible to explain to those who don't experience it. The American Psychiatric Association calls it the inability to engage in self-directed, purposeful activities. In other words, it is difficult for me to do anything unless someone else makes me do it. This is different from procrastination. The main point of contrast is that avolition affects areas of interest in addition to productivity. People who experience avolition can't even engage with activities they actually want to do, such as watching a movie or playing a video game. This is also a contributing factor to asociality. I don't put off work because I don't enjoy it. I put off work because it is a serious struggle for me to perform any activity at all, even ones that are fun for me. The disconnect between motivation and action is a part of me I don't understand. It's a source of pain for me. A typical day for me, left to my own devices, is a strange hybrid of stress and boredom. Although there are so many things I want to do, I always feel like I'm looking for ways to fill the time. I mostly watch YouTube videos and play browser games, but I don't really enjoy either. I feel as though my life is simply passing by me while I do nothing. My best guess why this happens is that people on the schizophrenia spectrum produce an overabundance of dopamine, which can lead us to prefer activities that provide only short-term gratification over meaningful ones. Another difference between avolition and procrastination is severity. A person with procrastination will eventually get the work done where I might not. I can stay stuck in the cycle of inaction for months, and I can go several full days in a row without getting out of bed. Avolition is a source of intense frustration for me. I often hear people with mental illnesses say that they wouldn't change their conditions if they could. I certainly wouldn't go that far. I think I would be much happier if I wasn't schizotypal. Still, there are some benefits to the condition. Presence on the schizophrenia spectrum is strongly correlated with abnormally high intelligence. I see myself as an observant, knowledgeable person, and I'm good at solving puzzles and problems. I don't process math as easily as most people, but I find it interesting, so I use my analytical strength to break problems down in a way that I can understand. I definitely have above-average math skills as a result. I'm good at reading people. I usually know things about others well before they tell me. I also notice abnormalities in my surroundings very quickly. I sometimes think I would be a good detective, but I can never solve mystery novels before I finish them, so probably not. I'm a good actor. I've spent pretty much my entire life imitating the behaviors and emotions of other people even though I don't really feel them myself, so it comes to me naturally. My strange thinking aids me as a filmmaker because it enables me to be more creative. Most importantly, some of you might wonder why I still hold the beliefs I do even knowing they're unusual. The reason is that I believe them in earnest. I think it's important to have a set of people whose connection with reality falls outside of the status quo, because if not, we might never produce new radical ideas, and then we could never make any progress. In the psychiatric world, personality disorders are infamously difficult to treat. They're not the result of traumatic experiences or chemical imbalances. They are deeply ingrained parts of who we are. Medication doesn't help. Therapy is only useful insofar as it can change your identity. Ultimately, a personality disorder is little more than deviation from social norms. I have to accept that the world was not designed to support me the way that it does other people. The only effective treatment for my condition would be for everyone else in my life to change their behavior drastically. I require lots of time and space to myself, but I also need a lot of affection and attention, even though I never express those feelings myself. I need to be free of judgment altogether, which would probably demand the entire cultural perception of loners to shift away from where it is now. I can't function very well in most jobs. I would need one that lets me work privately and accounts for my avolition. For me to be happy, I would need to overhaul the structure of the world and replace it with one that holds the same values I do, one where people like me are normal. I am an extremely needy person, and I can't reasonably expect others to cater to those needs. However, I believe that if more people understood personality disorders and psychosis, it would take a lot of pressure off of us to conform to standards outside our grasp. There is a disconnect between the popular conception of reality and my own. I don't have the power to mend that disconnect, but you do. Will you?